The sad story of Lena Baker. She had at least 4 strikes against her when she was born at the turn of the century in Randolph County, Georgia. She was from a small, rural southern town. She was a woman. She was poor. And she was black. Lena was born in a former slave cabin, about 5 miles southwest of Cuthbert. At the age of 44 in 1944, Lena had never known anything except hard work and the pangs of poverty and despair. She chopped cotton, cleaned houses, and took in laundry to help support her mother and her 3 children. She was born on June 8, 1900, to a family of sharecroppers and raised near Cuthbert, Georgia. Her family, which included 3 siblings, moved to the county seat when she was a child. As a child, Baker and her family worked for a farmer named J.A. Cox chopping cotton. They were not paid well, and even working in a laundry, the family was poor. At the age of 20, Baker and a black friend found they could make money by entertaining gentlemen. This came to attention of the Randolph County Sheriff, as their clientele were white and interracial relationships were illegal in Georgia. The 2 were arrested and spent several months in a workhouse. On release, she was ostracized by the black community, leading her to become an alcoholic. By the 1940s, Baker was the mother of 3 children and worked as a maid to support her family. In 1944, Baker started working for Ernest Knight, an older white man. He was a local gristmill owner. He hired her to care for him while he recovered from a broken leg. It must have, at first, seemed like a windfall. Knight was 23 years Baker's senior. It was well known in Cuthbert that Knight was a heavy drinker and that he often carried a pistol strapped to his shoulder. It wasn't long before a sexual relationship developed between Knight and Baker. When she attempted to extricate herself from this relationship, Knight locked her in his gristmill for several days at a time, kept her there as his slave woman. Knight's son and townspeople disliked their relationship, and tried to end it through threatening Baker. One night an argument between the 2 ensued, during which Knight threatened Baker with an iron bar. As she tried to escape, they struggled over his pistol and she shot and killed him. She immediately reported the incident and said she had acted in self-defense. At her trial, she claimed that he had imprisoned and threatened to shoot her should she attempt to leave, whereupon she took his gun and shot him. In the town of Cuthbert, Georgia, Knight was viewed as brutal and abusive. He was a failed farmer who ran a gristmill. He always had a pistol strapped to his chest. A relationship developed between the 2. Knight would provide Baker with alcohol in return for sex, and the whole town knew of it. Knight was persuaded by his oldest son to move to Tallahassee, Florida in an effort to break up the pair, but Baker came with him. Knight's oldest son then gave Baker an ultimatum to leave. She did, but Knight followed her back to Cuthbert. On the night of April 30, 1944, Lena Baker went to the house of J.A. Cox, who was then the town coroner, and told him that she had shot Knight. Cox told Baker to go to the sheriff, while he would go to gristmill where Baker said Knight's body was. Baker did not go to the sheriff, but instead went home. She was picked up by the sheriff later that night, but was cooperative. He gave her 2 days to sleep off the effects of the alcohol in her system. Baker then told her version of events. Knight had come to her house drunk and asked her to come to the mill. She did not want to, but knew better than to refuse the drunk man. She tried stalling him by asking for money to go buy some whiskey. He gave her some money and she went to the tavern but found it closed. She waited there for a while hoping that Knight would leave her house. She returned but found he was still there. She was forced to accompany him to the mill, but escaped and hid in some bushes. She bought some whiskey and went to sleep at the nearby convict camp. On waking the next morning she decided to go to the mill, and she was sure this was the last place that Knight would go. However, this was exactly where Knight was. He held her prisoner for several hours, even though several hours of his absence. He returned and told Baker he would kill her before she would ever leave again. A struggle ensued, with Baker being the only living witness. The details of what happened are sketchy at best, but Baker managed to get hold of Knight's pistol, which went off, hitting him in the head, instantly killing him. Although Knight was not liked in the town, a white man had been killed by a black woman, something that was intolerable to the segregationist townsfolk. Lena Baker was charged with capital murder and stood trial on August 14, 1944, presided over by Judge William Two Gun Warrell, who kept a pair of pistols on his judicial bench in plain view. The all-white male jury convicted her by the end of the afternoon. Her court-appointed counsel, W.L. Ferguson, filed an appeal but then dropped Baker as a client. Governor Ellis Arnold granted Lena a 60-day reprieve so that the Board of Pardons and Parole could review the case, but clemency was denied in January 1945. Baker was transferred to Reidsville State Prison on February 23, 1945. Her one-day trial was typical of the justice blacks received in the segregation era South. She was not allowed to testify, no witnesses were called to her defense, and the all-white, all-male jury delivered its guilty verdict in 20 minutes. Her appeal never made it beyond the county court, because her court-appointed attorney immediately resigned from the case, leaving her without counsel. Baker defended herself to the end. Lena's execution date was scheduled for March 5, 1945. On February 23 she was signed into one of the worst prisons in the United States, Reidsville State Prison, where she was housed in the men's section until just a few days before her execution, when she was moved to a solitary cell just a few feet from the execution chamber itself. Lena Baker, the only woman executed in Georgia's electric chair, she was electrocuted at the Georgia State Prison in Reidsville on March 5, 1945. The Cuthbert Times reported the execution with the headline, "Baker Burns." On entering the execution chamber, Baker calmly sat in the electric chair, called Old Sparky, and said, "What I done, I did in self-defense, or I would have been killed myself. Where I was, I could not overcome it. God has forgiven me. I have nothing against anyone. I picked cotton for Mr. Pritchett, and he has been good to me. I am ready to go. I am one in the number. I am ready to meet my God. I have a very strong conscience." Initially she was buried in an unmarked grave behind Mount Vernon Baptist Church. Since her pardoning, a simple headstone has been placed above her grave. In August 2005, the Georgia courts agreed to grant Baker a posthumous pardon, only the second in the state's history. The first was in 1986 for Leo Frank, lynched in 1915. In 1998, the congregation of the church Lena attended as a young woman raised $250 for a slab and marker for her grave. Thank you for watching Death Row.